Picture this. You're 16 years old, brilliant, fluent in Latin, Greek, and French, with a passion for theology that would make a bishop weep. You've never asked for power, never dreamed of wearing a crown. In fact, you'd rather be left alone with your books and your prayers. But here's the thing about Tudor England. What you want doesn't matter. What you need doesn't matter. What matters is what other people want from you. And right now, everyone wants you dead or crowned, sometimes both. Your name is Lady Jane Grey, and you're about to become the most reluctant queen in English history. You'll rule for 9 days, earn the nickname the 9 Days Queen, and then lose your head to the executioner's axe. All because you were born into the wrong family at the wrong time with the wrong bloodline. Welcome to 1553, where teenage girls don't get to choose their destiny, they get to die for it. You wake up on July 10th, 1553, in a house that isn't yours, surrounded by people who claim to love you but feel more like captors. Your father-in-law, John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, has been pacing the halls for hours. He's the most powerful man in England after the king, and he's got that look in his eyes, the one that says he's about to ruin someone's life for political gain. Today, that someone is you. The news comes like a slap. King Edward VI is dead. The boy king, your cousin, the Protestant hope of England, gone at 15. You should be mourning. Instead, you're being told that you're now Queen of England. Not asked, told. Because apparently, Edward left a will naming you as his successor, bypassing his half-sisters Mary and Elizabeth. You know this is wrong. You know Mary is the rightful heir. You know this is treason. But no one is asking for your opinion. You collapse. Not dramatically, just a complete physical shutdown. Your body refuses to cooperate with this madness. You fall to your knees, then to the floor, sobbing. This isn't joy, this isn't triumph, this is terror in its purest form. You're 16 years old, and you've just been handed a death sentence disguised as a crown. The men around you, these powerful lords and advisors, they watch you break down with the patience of people who've done this before. They're not monsters, not exactly. They're just men who've decided that your life is worth less than their political ambitions. They help you to your feet, brush off your skirts, and tell you to compose yourself. You're the Queen of England now. Act like it. But here's what they don't understand. You never wanted to act like anything. You wanted to be left alone to study, to pray, to live quietly. You're not built for this. You're built for scholarship, for contemplation, for the kind of life where your biggest decision is which theological text to read next. Now, you're being asked to rule a kingdom that's about to tear itself apart. Your husband, Guilford Dudley, stands beside you looking almost as terrified as you feel. He's handsome in that soft, privileged way that boys from powerful families often are. You've been married to him for less than 2 months, and it's been a disaster. He's spoiled, demanding, and has already made it clear that he expects to be crowned king alongside you, because that's what this is really about. Not your claim to the throne, but his family's grab for power. You look around the room at these men who've just upended your life. Your father, Henry Grey, Duke of Suffolk, stands there nodding along like this is all perfectly normal. Your mother, Frances Grey, looks pleased, as if she's just been told you've won a prize at the county fair. And John Dudley, the puppet master himself, is already talking about coronation plans and parliamentary sessions. None of them ask how you feel. None of them care that you're shaking, that you can barely breathe, that you're looking at them like they've just told you the world is ending. Because to them, you're not a person, you're a chess piece. A very important, very valuable chess piece, but still just a piece to be moved around the board. The next few days blur together in a haze of ceremony and panic. You're moved to the Tower of London, which sounds ominous but is actually where English monarchs traditionally stay before their coronation. The irony isn't lost on you. The Tower is also where English monarchs traditionally get executed. You're not sure which tradition you're following yet. The apartments are grand, luxurious even. Rich tapestries, fine furniture, servants who bow so low they practically scrape the floor. But it all feels like a gilded cage. You can't leave. You can't refuse. You can't even express doubt without being reminded that you're committing treason against yourself, which is possibly the most absurd thing you've ever heard. Your advisors brief you on matters of state. The treasury is nearly empty. The Protestant Reformation is still fragile. The Catholic faction is gathering around Mary Tudor, Edward's half-sister, who's currently somewhere in East Anglia raising an army that, by all rights, should be supporting the rightful queen, which isn't you. You try to tell them this. You try to explain that Mary has the stronger claim, that the people will never accept you, that this is madness. They nod politely and change the subject. It's like being trapped in a dream where everyone around you is speaking a language you don't understand. Except you understand it perfectly, and that's the problem. Meanwhile, outside the Tower, England is choosing sides, and it's not choosing you. Reports come in daily. Town after town is declaring for Mary. Lord after lord is abandoning your cause. Even your own supporters are starting to look nervous, like they're beginning to realize they've backed the wrong horse. But here's the thing about being queen, even for 9 days. You still have to do the job. You still have to sign documents, make decisions, pretend you know what you're doing. And surprisingly, you're not terrible at it. You have a good mind, a solid education, and a genuine desire to do right by the people. Under different circumstances, you might have been a decent ruler. Instead, you're a girl playing dress-up in a crown that doesn't fit, surrounded by men who are already calculating how to distance themselves from you when this all falls apart. And it is going to fall apart. Everyone knows it. The question isn't whether you'll lose the throne. The question is whether you'll survive losing it. Your daily routine becomes a surreal mixture of royal duties and barely suppressed panic. You wake up in silk sheets, attended by servants who treat you like a goddess. You eat breakfast off gold plates while receiving reports about armies marching toward London. You sign laws and charters while your advisors quietly debate whether to flee the country. The most absurd part is the ceremony. Even in the middle of a crisis, even with Mary's forces growing stronger by the day, your advisors insist on maintaining royal protocol. You must be addressed as Your Majesty. You must wear the crown during formal audiences. You must process through the Tower with all the pomp and circumstance of a legitimate monarch. It's theater. Elaborate, expensive theater performed for an audience that's already walking out. But you play your part because what else can you do? You're 16 years old, trapped in a role you never wanted, surrounded by people who claim to serve you but really serve themselves. Your husband, Guilford, is becoming more insufferable by the day. He's convinced that he should be crowned king, not just prince consort. He throws tantrums when you refuse, accusing you of being ungrateful, of not understanding politics. He's probably right about the politics part. You don't understand why anyone would want this nightmare. The arguments with Guilford become a daily occurrence. He storms around your apartments demanding recognition, demanding respect, demanding a crown of his own. You try to explain that you don't even want the crown you have, that this whole situation is madness, that you'd happily give it all up if someone would just let you go home. But there is no home anymore. Your family's fate is tied to yours now. If you fall, they fall with you. If you succeed, they rise to unprecedented heights. The pressure is crushing. You're not just responsible for your own life, but for the lives of everyone who supported your claim. The letters from Mary start arriving around day 5. She's surprisingly gracious, considering you're technically usurping her throne. She offers pardons, compromises, negotiations. She's willing to let you live if you'll just abdicate quietly. Your advisors reject these offers immediately. They've come too far to back down now. But you read the letters anyway when you're alone. Mary's words are kind, understanding even. She knows you didn't choose this. She knows you're as much a victim as anyone. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone is treating you like a human being rather than a political symbol. The reports from the outside world become increasingly grim. Mary's army is growing while yours is shrinking. Lords who swore loyalty to you are defecting daily. The people, who were supposed to rally to the Protestant cause, seem more interested in supporting the legitimate heir than the girl who's been thrust upon them. Your father-in-law, John Dudley, decides to take matters into his own hands. He's going to march out of London to confront Mary's forces personally. This is either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. He gives you a stirring speech about duty and honor before he leaves, but you can see the fear in his eyes. He knows this is desperate. With Dudley gone, the atmosphere in the tower changes. The remaining advisors are jumpier, more argumentative. Some are already talking about terms of surrender. Others insist you should fight to the death. None of them ask what you want to do. You're still just a chess piece, albeit one that's about to be taken off the board. You spend more time praying now. Not just because you're facing death, though that's certainly part of it, but because prayer is the only thing that still makes sense. In your conversations with God, you can be honest about your fears, your doubts, your complete bewilderment at how you ended up here. You can admit that you never wanted any of this, that you'd trade the crown for a quiet life without hesitation. The servants start treating you differently. Not with less respect exactly, but with a kind of sad kindness that suggests they know how this story ends. They bring you your favorite foods without being asked. They speak more gently. They look at you like you're already dead, which is probably accurate. Sleep becomes impossible. You lie in your grand bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that led to this moment. Your education, which was supposed to be your greatest asset, feels like a curse. You know enough history to understand exactly what happens to failed usurpers. You know enough theology to worry about the state of your soul. You know enough about politics to realize that everyone who supported you was using you. The letters from your parents become increasingly frantic. They're still trying to prop up your reign, still insisting that you can win this, still treating you like a political asset rather than their daughter. You write back, but your words feel hollow. What can you say? That you're scared? That you want to come home? That you never asked for any of this? They know all of that already. They just don't care. On July 19th, 9 days after you were proclaimed queen, reality finally catches up with the fantasy. The Privy Council, the same group of men who put you on the throne, meet in secret and decide to abandon you. They're going to declare for Mary. They're going to proclaim her the rightful queen. They're going to pretend that the last 9 days never happened. No one tells you this directly. You find out when servants start avoiding eye contact, when guards become more formal, when the usual bustle of royal business simply stops. The Tower of London becomes very quiet very quickly. It's the sound of people distancing themselves from a lost cause. Your father-in-law returns from his failed campaign looking like a man who's seen his own grave. His army dissolved almost without a fight. Mary's forces are now marching on London unopposed. The game is over. You've lost. More importantly, you've lost in a way that's going to get you killed. The formal announcement comes in the afternoon. The Privy Council, led by men who were bowing to you just hours earlier, inform you that they've decided to support Mary's claim. They're very sorry, they say, but they have no choice. The will of the people must be respected. Mary is the rightful queen. You want to laugh, or cry, or scream? Instead, you just nod. Because what else can you do? You're 16 years old, and you've just been abandoned by everyone who put you in this position. You're alone in the Tower of London with a husband who's probably going to blame you for everything, and a future that's looking very short indeed. The crown is removed from your head with the same ceremony that placed it there. The documents proclaiming you queen are gathered up and probably burned. The royal apartments are prepared for their new occupant. You are moved to more modest quarters, the kind reserved for prisoners rather than monarchs. The transformation is startling. One moment you're the Queen of England, the next you're a traitor waiting for judgment. The same servants who bowed to you this morning now avoid looking at you directly. The same guards who protected you now keep you under surveillance. The same advisors who counseled you now act like they've never seen you before. Your husband, Guilford, takes the change about as well as you'd expect. He alternates between blaming you for the failure and raging about the injustice of it all. As if any of this was just. As if fairness was ever part of the equation. He's particularly bitter about not being crowned king, which seems like a remarkably petty concern, given that you're both probably going to die. The first few days of imprisonment are the worst. Not because of the conditions, which are actually quite comfortable, but because of the uncertainty. You don't know if Mary will honor her earlier promises of mercy. You don't know if you'll be put on trial. You don't know if you'll live to see another month. You spend the time writing letters to your parents, begging them to negotiate for your life. To Mary, acknowledging her rightful claim and asking for forgiveness. To God, preparing your soul for whatever comes next. The writing helps. It gives you something to do with your hands, something to focus on other than the sound of footsteps in the corridor that might be coming for you. Mary's entry into London is everything your reign wasn't. The people line the streets cheering. Church bells ring. There are celebrations and pageantry and all the signs of a legitimate monarch taking her rightful place. You hear about it from your guards, who seem almost relieved to be serving someone the people actually want. Your first meeting with Mary comes sooner than expected. She's surprisingly kind, considering you've spent the last 9 days sitting on her throne. She's also surprisingly understanding. She knows you didn't choose this. She knows you were used by ambitious men who cared more about power than your life. Mary offers you a deal. Renounce your claim publicly, convert to Catholicism, and she'll spare your life. You'll be kept under house arrest, probably for the rest of your life, but you'll live. It's more mercy than most failed usurpers receive. It's also a choice that reveals everything about who you really are. You refuse, not out of political calculation or stubborn pride, but out of genuine religious conviction. You're Protestant to your core. You believe in the reforms of the English Church, in the primacy of Scripture, in the doctrines that Mary considers heretical. You'd rather die than betray your faith. This surprises everyone, including Mary. They expected you to take the deal, to choose life over principle. After all, you're young, you have everything to live for, and religious conversion is a small price to pay for survival. But you're not just any teenager. You're a teenager who's been raised on theological debate, who's read extensively in both Latin and Greek, who genuinely believes in the importance of religious truth. Your refusal changes everything. Mary can't let you live if you won't convert. A Protestant claimant to the throne is too dangerous to keep around, especially one with your bloodline and education. You've essentially signed your own death warrant out of religious conviction. The trial is a formality. You're charged with high treason, which carries a mandatory death sentence. The evidence is overwhelming because you were, technically, committing treason every day you sat on the throne. Your defense is that you were coerced, which is true but legally irrelevant. You conduct yourself with dignity throughout the proceedings. You acknowledge your guilt while maintaining your innocence. You admit that you accepted the crown while insisting that you never wanted it. You're calm, articulate, and completely doomed. The verdict surprises no one. Death by beheading, the traditional punishment for traitors of noble birth. The sentence is to be carried out at the Tower of London, where you've been imprisoned since losing the throne. There's a certain grim symmetry to it all. You entered the tower as a queen, and you'll leave it as a corpse. Mary delays the execution, probably hoping you'll change your mind about converting. She sends priests to speak with you, theologians to debate with you, advisors to reason with you. They all leave frustrated. You're polite but immovable. You'll discuss theology happily for hours, but you won't budge on the fundamental points of your faith. The delay stretches on for months. You're kept in comfortable quarters, allowed to read and write, permitted visits from family. It's a strange kind of existence, living under a death sentence that might never be carried out. You begin to hope that maybe Mary will commute your sentence, that maybe you'll spend your life in comfortable captivity rather than dying on the block. Then your father ruins everything. Henry Grey, Duke of Suffolk, decides to join Wyatt's rebellion, a Protestant uprising against Mary's planned marriage to Philip of Spain. It's a disaster from start to finish, but it's also the last straw for Mary. She can't afford to show mercy to the Grey family anymore. The news of your father's rebellion reaches you in your cell. You know immediately what it means. Any chance of clemency has just evaporated. Mary can't let you live when your own family is actively plotting against her. Your father's stupidity has sealed your fate. Your last few weeks are a mixture of preparation and resignation. You write letters to your sister, who's also been imprisoned but will probably survive. You compose prayers and meditations. You work on a confession that acknowledges your crimes while maintaining your innocence. You prepare to die. The night before your execution, you can't sleep. Not because you're afraid of death exactly, but because you're afraid of dying badly. You've heard stories of botched executions, of people who took multiple blows to die, of the crowd jeering and laughing. You pray for a quick death, a skilled executioner, and the strength to face your end with dignity. Your final morning dawns gray and cold, February 12th, 1554. You're 19 years old, though you feel much older. The last few months have aged you in ways that go beyond simple time. You're no longer the frightened girl who collapsed when told she was queen. You're a young woman who's made peace with her fate. The execution is to be private, held within the tower walls rather than on the public scaffold. This is a mercy of sorts. You won't have to face the jeering crowd, the vendors selling food and drink, the carnival atmosphere that surrounds public executions. You'll die in relative dignity, witnessed only by a small group of officials and guards. Your husband, Guilford, is executed first. You watch from your window as he's led to the block. He's young, handsome, and completely unprepared for what's happening to him. He dies badly, requiring 2 blows from the executioner. The sight of his body being carried away in a cart is your last glimpse of the man you married, but never really knew. Your turn comes quickly afterward. You're led from your cell to the scaffold, a simple wooden platform with a block and a basket for your head. The executioner is professional, experienced, chosen, specifically for his skill. This is not a job for amateurs. You're allowed to speak before you die. Your words are brief, dignified, and completely honest. You acknowledge your guilt under the law while maintaining your innocence of any evil intent. You forgive your enemies, including Mary. You reaffirm your Protestant faith. You ask the crowd to pray for your soul. The executioner asks for your forgiveness, as is traditional. You grant it willingly. He's just doing his job, and you bear him no ill will. You kneel at the block, position your head correctly, and speak your final words. Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit. The axe falls cleanly. You feel nothing after the blade severs your neck. Your body convulses briefly, then goes still. Your head rolls into the basket, eyes still open, mouth slightly parted. The crowd stands in respectful silence. Even in death, you command a certain dignity. Your story becomes legend almost immediately. The 9 days queen, the Protestant martyr, the girl who chose death over betrayal of her faith. Poets write about you. Historians debate your legacy. Protestants claim you as a saint. Catholics remember you as a cautionary tale about the dangers of religious extremism. But here's what gets lost in all the myth-making. You were just a teenager. A brilliant, principled, deeply religious teenager who got caught up in other people's ambitions and paid the ultimate price. You never wanted to be queen. You never wanted to be a martyr. You just wanted to be left alone to study and pray and live quietly. Your death changes nothing and everything. Mary remains queen, continues her persecution of Protestants, and dies childless a few years later. Elizabeth, the half-sister you never really knew, takes the throne and establishes the Protestant Church permanently. The religious settlement you died for eventually wins, though not in the way anyone expected. Your legacy is complicated. You're remembered as a victim of political ambition, a religious martyr, a cautionary tale about the dangers of putting children on thrones. All of these things are true, but you're also remembered as someone who chose principle over survival, who faced death with dignity, who refused to betray her deepest beliefs even when it would have saved her life. In the end, that's what matters. Not the 9 days you spent as queen, not the political machinations that put you on the throne, not even the religious conflicts that killed you. What matters is that when faced with the ultimate choice between life and principle, you chose principle. You died as you lived, with integrity. The scaffold where you died is long gone. The Tower of London still stands, now a tourist attraction rather than a prison. Visitors come to see the place where you spent your last months, where you faced your final choice, where you died for your beliefs. They take pictures and buy souvenirs and try to imagine what it was like to be in your position. But they can't really imagine it. None of us can. The weight of a crown you never wanted. The pressure of expectations you never asked for. The choice between life and faith that no 19-year-old should have to make. Your story is uniquely yours, shaped by the particular circumstances of Tudor England and the specific religious conflicts of your time. Yet there's something universal about it too. The idea of being trapped by other people's ambitions, of having to choose between survival and principle, of facing death with dignity. These are human experiences that transcend any particular time or place. That's why your story still resonates, why people still remember the 9 days queen who chose death over betrayal. You were crowned queen and beheaded within months, but your real victory was smaller and more personal. You faced the ultimate test of character and past. You remained true to yourself and your beliefs even when it cost you everything. In a world full of people who compromise, who bend with the wind, who choose expediency over principle, you stood firm. That's the real tragedy of Lady Jane Grey. Not that you died young, though that's certainly tragic. Not that you lost the throne, though that's certainly unfair. The real tragedy is that you were forced to make a choice that no one should have to make, and you made it with a courage that few people possess. Your story is a reminder that sometimes the most important battles are the ones we fight within ourselves, between our desire to live and our need to remain true to our principles. You fought that battle and won, even though it cost you your life. That's not just tragic, that's heroic. And perhaps that's the most fitting epitaph for Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen who chose death over compromise and dignity over survival. In a world that often seems to reward the opposite, your example still shines. Brief, brilliant, and ultimately triumphant, even in defeat. The years pass, and your story becomes more myth than history. Protestant writers transform you into a perfect martyr, all virtue and no flaws. Catholic historians dismiss you as a naive pawn who got what she deserved. The truth, as always, is more complicated. You were neither saint nor fool, but something far more interesting. A real person caught in an impossible situation who chose authenticity over survival. Your cousin Elizabeth, who becomes a queen after Mary's death, never speaks publicly about you. How could she? Your story is too close to her own. She too could have been sacrificed for other people's ambitions. She too had to navigate the treacherous waters of Tudor politics. The difference is that she survived and you didn't. Whether that makes her luckier or more ruthless depends on who's telling the story. The religious settlement that Elizabeth eventually establishes is, ironically, much closer to what you believed than what Mary tried to impose. The Church of England becomes permanently Protestant, though with more tolerance for different viewpoints than either you or Mary would have preferred. Your death contributes to this outcome, though not in any way you could have foreseen. Your books survive you. The theological treatises you studied, the prayers you wrote, the letters you composed during your imprisonment. They're preserved in libraries and private collections, testament to a brilliant mind that was never allowed to fully develop. Scholars study your Latin translations, your Greek commentaries, your surprisingly sophisticated understanding of Protestant theology. You were, they conclude, probably the most educated woman of your generation. But education couldn't save you. Intelligence couldn't protect you. Religious conviction couldn't shield you from the executioner's axe. In the end, you died because you were born into the wrong family at the wrong time with the wrong beliefs. The randomness of it all is perhaps the most tragic aspect of your story. Your sister Catherine, who survives her own imprisonment, lives to see Elizabeth's reign but never escapes the shadow of the Grey family name. She marries in secret, has children, and dies young, worn down by years of political suspicion and royal displeasure. Your younger sister Mary lives longer but never marries, never has children, never risks drawing attention to herself. The Grey line effectively ends with your execution. The house where you were told you were queen is demolished and rebuilt. The Tower of London, where you spent your final months, becomes a tourist attraction. Visitors come to see the place where you died, but they also come to see where Anne Boleyn was executed, where the princes in the tower disappeared, where countless other victims of Tudor politics met their end. You're part of a larger story now, a thread in the tapestry of English royal brutality. Your executioner, whose name history doesn't bother to record, goes on to execute other people. It's his job, after all, professional, efficient, unremarkable. He probably doesn't think about you much once the deed is done. You're just another head in the basket, another body to be disposed of, another day's work in the grim business of state-sanctioned murder. The crowd that watches you die disperses quickly. They have other things to do, other places to be. Some of them probably go home and tell their families about the brave young woman who died well. Others might mention it in passing, like commenting on the weather. A few might not mention it at all. Death, even royal death, is common enough in Tudor England. Your husband's family, the Dudleys, never recovers from the disaster of your brief reign. John Dudley, the architect of the whole scheme, is executed shortly after your father-in-law. The family lands are confiscated, their titles revoked, their political influence destroyed. They gambled everything on making you queen and lost catastrophically. You're not sorry about this. They destroyed your life for their ambitions. The Protestant cause, which you died defending, survives and eventually thrives. But it takes a different path than anyone expected. Elizabeth's religious settlement is more pragmatic than principled, more political than theological. She's willing to compromise in ways that you never were. Perhaps that's why she succeeds where you failed. Or perhaps she's just luckier. Your parents, who pushed you into this nightmare, never quite recover from the guilt. Your father dies in prison, executed for his part in Wyatt's rebellion. Your mother survives, but lives the rest of her life under suspicion, never again wielding the political influence she once enjoyed. They get a form of justice, though not the kind you would have wanted. The letters you wrote during your imprisonment become historical documents, studied by scholars trying to understand the religious conflicts of your time. Your words, preserved on parchment, outlast your body. In a strange way, you achieve a kind of immortality through your writings. Your voice, silenced by the executioner's axe, continues to speak across the centuries. Your story becomes a cautionary tale told to other young women of noble birth. Don't trust ambitious men, they're warned. Don't let yourself be used as a political pawn. Don't sacrifice your life for other people's dreams. It's good advice, though not always practical. In a world where women have little control over their own destinies, sometimes being a pawn is the only role available. The crown you wore for 9 days is melted down and reformed into other royal regalia. The gold that touched your head becomes part of other crowns, worn by other monarchs, blessed for other coronations. There's something poetic about this recycling of royal metal, this transformation of your brief triumph into other people's lasting power. Your tomb is simple, unmarked, forgotten. You're buried in the Tower of London, in the same chapel where Anne Boleyn lies. 2 queens, both young, both beautiful, both executed for political reasons. Neither of you chose your fate, but you both faced it with dignity. The chapel is small, quiet, a place where tourists rarely venture. It's fitting somehow that your final resting place is peaceful. The scaffold where you died is dismantled, and the wood used for other construction projects. The block where you laid your head is stored away, eventually becoming a museum piece. People come to stare at it, to touch the wood where your neck rested, to imagine what it felt like to be in your position. They can't imagine it, of course. The reality is too specific, too personal, too immediate. Your story gets retold in countless ways over the centuries: plays, novels, paintings, films. Each generation finds something different in your brief life and violent death. To the Victorians, you're a romantic martyr. To modern feminists, you're a victim of patriarchal oppression. To religious historians, you're a theological symbol. All of these interpretations contain some truth, but none captures the full complexity of who you were. The 9 days you spent as queen become more famous than the 19 years you spent as a person. This is the cruel irony of your legacy. The period of your life you hated most, the role you never wanted, the crown you wore reluctantly, these become the defining elements of your story. Your intelligence, your education, your spiritual depth, your personal struggles, all of these are overshadowed by those 9 terrible days. But perhaps that's appropriate. Those 9 days reveal everything important about your character. Your reluctance to take power, your dignity under pressure, your refusal to compromise your beliefs, your courage in the face of death. In 9 days, you showed more integrity than most people manage in a lifetime. Gary, the brevity of your reign doesn't diminish its significance. The political crisis that put you on the throne and then killed you is eventually resolved, but not in the way anyone expected. The Protestant-Catholic divide that seemed so important, so worth dying for, gradually becomes less central to English politics. Religious tolerance, unthinkable in your time, slowly becomes accepted. The theological questions you debated so passionately become academic rather than life-or-death issues. Your death contributes to this change, though not directly. Each execution, each act of religious persecution, each young life wasted on theological disputes, gradually convinces people that perhaps accommodation is better than martyrdom. Your sacrifice, and the sacrifices of others like you, eventually makes such sacrifices unnecessary. The England you died for, Protestant England, survives and prospers, but it becomes something different than you envisioned. More tolerant, more pragmatic, more willing to compromise. You might not recognize the church you died defending if you could see it today. Whether you'd approve of its evolution is another question entirely. Your name becomes synonymous with brief, doomed reigns. A 9 days wonder enters the language as a phrase, meaning something that's briefly famous, then quickly forgotten. It's not entirely fair. You haven't been forgotten. Your story continues to fascinate people centuries after your death. But language evolves, and your name becomes attached to the concept of fleeting fame. The tower where you spent your final months becomes a symbol of royal oppression. Generations of tourists come to see the place where you died, where others were imprisoned, where the machinery of state terror operated. Your death becomes part of a larger narrative about the brutality of absolute monarchy. Your evidence in an argument about the need for constitutional limits on royal power. Your intellectual legacy is harder to trace, but equally important. The books you read, the ideas you absorbed, the theological positions you defended, all of these contribute to the development of English Protestant thought. You're not just a political martyr, but an intellectual one, dying for ideas as much as for power. The quiet courage you showed in your final moments becomes a model for others facing similar choices. Not just other potential martyrs, but anyone who has to choose between survival and principle, between compromise and integrity, between the easy path and the right path. Your example suggests that such choices are worth making, even when the cost is ultimate. Your story reminds us that history is made by individuals, not just by forces and trends and movements. You were one person making one choice, but that choice reverberates through time. Your decision to die rather than convert changes not just your own fate, but the fate of the Protestant cause you died defending. The loneliness of your final months, trapped in the tower with a death sentence hanging over you, is perhaps the most human aspect of your story. You were 19 years old, facing execution, abandoned by almost everyone who had once supported you, yet you maintained your dignity, your faith, and your principles. The isolation makes your courage more remarkable, not less. Your last letter, written to your sister, survives. In it, you express no regret for your choices, no bitterness about your fate, no anger at the people who destroyed your life. You're concerned about her future, hopeful about your own salvation, resigned to your death. It's the letter of someone who has made peace with an impossible situation. The priest who visits you in your final weeks is struck by your composure. He expects to find a frightened girl, desperate for any comfort religion can provide. Instead, he finds someone who has already worked through the theological implications of her situation, who has accepted her fate with a calm that unsettles him. You're more prepared for death than he is to help you face it. Your final prayer, spoken before you place your head on the block, becomes famous in Protestant circles. Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit. The same words Christ spoke on the cross, chosen deliberately, consciously. You're not just dying, you're making a statement about the nature of sacrifice, about the relationship between earthly and divine authority. The executioner's axe that kills you is sharp, well-maintained, wielded by an expert. This is both mercy and efficiency. Mary doesn't want you to suffer unnecessarily, but she also doesn't want the execution to become a spectacle of incompetence. Your death is to be quick, clean, professional. It is. Your body is wrapped in a simple shroud and buried without ceremony. No elaborate tomb, no magnificent monument, no lasting memorial. Just a young woman's corpse in a wooden box, lowered into the ground and covered with dirt. The contrast between your brief moment of royal splendor and your anonymous burial is stark. But anonymity doesn't last. Within years, people are making pilgrimages to your grave. Protestant martyrs need shrines, and you become one of the most important. Your tomb becomes a place of prayer, remembrance, and quiet rebellion against the Catholic regime that killed you. The ripple effects of your death continue long after your burial. Every subsequent religious persecution in England is measured against your example. Every future martyr is compared to you. Every young woman facing political pressure is reminded of your fate. You become a cautionary tale and an inspiration simultaneously. Your story ends with your execution, but your legend is just beginning. The 9 Days Queen who chose death over compromise becomes a symbol of integrity in a world that often seems to reward the opposite. Your brief life, tragic though it was, stands as proof that principle can triumph over expediency, that character matters more than survival, that some things are worth dying for. In the end, perhaps that's enough. You didn't live long, but you lived well. You didn't rule successfully, but you ruled honestly. You didn't survive, but you remained true to yourself. In a world full of people who compromise their beliefs for advancement, who betray their principles for power, who choose survival over integrity, you stand as a reminder that there is another way. The scaffold is gone, the tower has become a tourist attraction, and the religious wars that killed you are ancient history. But your example endures. Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen who chose death over betrayal, conscience over compromise, integrity over survival. Brief, brilliant, and ultimately triumphant. Even in defeat, that's not just a legacy, that's immortality.